One of the misconceptions you could have is it's already mainstream. I think it's not at all mainstream. It's still very niche, even though the biggest brands in the world are doing stuff with it.
Hello and welcome to DeFire, your crypto storytelling podcast that's not afraid to tell it like it is. My name is Jonas, and today we are going on a bit of a digital adventure. I recently got to sit down with Marc Baumann. Now, Marc is an interesting guy. He used to be the head of marketing at Bitcoin Suisse, and these days he's out there in the wild helping companies navigate the weird and wonderful world of Web3, NFTs, and this thing they call the Metaverse. Marc and I had a chat about his time at Bitcoin Suisse, what it takes for crypto to go mainstream, and where he sees this whole digital revolution heading. It's a conversation that's part tech, part marketing, and all kinds of fascinating. So whether you are a crypto native or just someone who is curious about where all this internet money stuff is going, stick around, we've got a great show for you. So get comfortable, put those headphones on, and let's jump into the digital deep end with Marc Baumann. But before we start, a quick word from our sponsor. Hey listeners, I'm happy to announce that I'm launching a brand new venture. I'm still looking for a good name, but it's basically podcasting as a service. If you have ever recorded a podcast, you know that it's a ton of work. Especially after you've done the fun part, which is the recording of the podcast, the real work begins. You need to make the sound good, edit the conversation, take out all these ums and ems, mix the podcast and master it, upload it to all the relevant channels and platforms. And that's not all. You also have to promote the episode, write show notes and the promo material, like those little videos for LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, or even TikTok. So wouldn't it be amazing if there would be a team of experts doing all of this work for you, so you can focus on what you're good at, having meaningful conversations with industry leaders? Well, that's exactly what you get when you partner with me. If that is something you and your company might be interested in, I would happily take you on as a client. It doesn't matter if you already have a podcast or if you want to launch one. This is a limited time offer, so don't hesitate to get in touch with me now to figure out the details. Send me an email to jonas@defire.money and we take it from there. That's jonas@defire.money. And now let's start the show. One thing I also wanted to ask you actually before we start is what would this episode make a success for you from your perspective? What do you want out of this?
It's a success if listeners who don't know a lot about crypto or a lot about Web3 afterwards know what those concepts or those things are about, and that it's not all about those negative things that we heard recently in the news all the time, and that they see the potential of it, but also that they recognize the limitations that we currently have. Mm-hmm. I'm not a guy who just sings the crypto or Web3 gospel blindly or based on ideology. I think it's very important to take it back to reality and see it in the eyes of a normal user.
Yeah, no, and I definitely feel similar because I sometimes feel really frustrated with the space and even thinking about quitting, like if you're too long in here, and sometimes you just think, what the hell? But today is not one of those days. Actually, it was a very positive week. And you also just posted something on LinkedIn. And maybe let me quickly just introduce you and you can fill in the gaps. And then we take it from there. So I'm talking to you, Marc Baumann. You've been the head of marketing at Bitcoin Suisse. You joined around 2018, right? So kind of in the bear market. And Bitcoin Suisse is founded by this eccentric, now billionaire, Niklas Nikolajsen. How did you end up at Bitcoin Suisse? What was your intro to this space?
My intro was actually rather coincidental. So I've looked into blockchain, I've looked into crypto before. We even had a course at university on it. And I knew there's something interesting about it. And there's some revolution in a way coming up, but I didn't yet fully understand the concept behind it. I just thought it was intriguing. And what it made it even more intriguing was when I met Niklas Nikolajsen and the CEO of Bitcoin Suisse at that time, Arthur Valoyan. because I just felt there's a very special energy about those two people in their vision, in what their plans are, and also the opportunities that lie ahead in such an early and young dynamic field. I studied at University of St. Gallen, and sometimes I think when you went to St. Gallen, you're a bit narrow how you see the world afterwards. And that was for me a very welcoming, I would say, almost way out of the normal path that a typical Hauske student would do.
Yeah, and St. Gallen is like this very prestigious business school here in Switzerland. There's a lot of stereotypes, like the young rich Germans drive there with their Porsches from their daddy, etc. And it's a great school. A lot of people go into consulting, go into banking, all that kind of stuff. And you were also there, but you always felt a little bit different in that regard. Like when you looked around in the room, did you feel like the odd one out, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, but I was always intrigued by doing things a little bit differently and doing things that have an unknown outcome.
Hmm.
And that was such a thing because at the time in 2018, for the people who started in crypto very, very early, so as you may know, Bitcoin was conceived in 2008, 9, and there are people who are in the space since then, like Niklas Nikolajsen was. 2018 was not early at all, right? But
Hmm. Yeah.
for us normal people, 2018 was quite early because no one knew about Bitcoin at that time in crypto, and it was
Mhm.
all still very not mainstream.
So that's interesting. So you actually landed in this company somehow, but you were not one of those early ideologists. You heard about it, and then somehow this opportunity presented itself. And yeah, you mentioned also Niklas Nikolajsen, because I met him quite early on. And he is a really charismatic, very witty guy, tall, looks like a pirate, dresses, is very eccentric. Recently bought like a tank, has a lot of weird hobbies and interests, like gold coins and old weapons and buying a fort. He also bought. Tell us some stories about Niklas Nikolajsen, and let's paint a picture of who is the founder of Bitcoin Swiss.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He's very eccentric. He's a very inspiring person when you know him, when you're a bit closer to him. And I think he was also the right person to build that company up. He built it up with two other young guys, Andre and Fabian. At that time, that was 2013, they were both studying at the University of St. Gallen as well. And during the evenings, they would travel to Zug and help Nicholas out in starting the business. And that was a really hard time. So for the first 4 years of the Bitcoin Swiss company, from 2013 to about 2017, when the first bull run started and the topic became a bit more public, that was a hard time. And it needed a person like Niklas Nikolajsen, who had a very clear vision of that technology, who had a very deep understanding of the technology. Initially, he's a programmer, he studied IT, but he also had a very clear understanding from an economic perspective, from a political perspective. And that's actually also what makes that space so interesting and the technology so interesting.
Mhm.
Bitcoin and crypto is not only a technology, it's much more.
What could you actually do on Bitcoin Swiss? Bitcoin Swiss is a broker. It's not an exchange. What exactly? Who are the customers of Bitcoin Swiss? I've never became a customer, and I was also early in the game. But there were options for Swiss people to buy crypto before. What was the niche that they filled?
Mhm. So Bitcoin Swiss started as a broker, which means that people would call Niklas up. At that time, they only had their personal cell phones and they wanted to trade Bitcoin. They wanted to buy Bitcoin. At that time, there was only Bitcoin, nothing else. And they facilitated those trades because they had the connections to the first exchanges. They knew their way around within the ecosystem. And that was really the start of the business. And actually, that's also quite a funny story. Even before that, Nicholas worked at Credit Suisse. as a computer programmer.
Now gone, yeah.
Yeah, now
Crazy.
gone.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted to start the project Bitcoin Suisse internally at Credit Suisse, and they weren't a big fan of that, so he quit that job and just did it on his own. And that's actually also where the name Bitcoin Suisse comes from. It's initially an adaptation of Credit Suisse. So that was the start of the business, selling, buying Bitcoin for friends, basically.
Okay.
And that continued and continued for the first years, and the business got a little bit bigger. When you look at the first websites, that looked very, very mundane. It's basically like a website of the 90s when
Mhm.
you compare it to websites today. So that's the gap that's between now and then. And then they started just adding services, always based on client demand. So suddenly those people needed a place to store their crypto. So they built up a custody business, or they needed a way to get additional liquidity. So they built up a collateralized lending business, and so on and so on. And today, Bitcoin Swiss is the biggest crypto financial service provider in Switzerland, and they offer the whole range of crypto financial services.
But it also serves people abroad, right? It's not just Swiss people, because the Swiss market is tiny. I mean, we have like around 8 million people now living in Switzerland. And yeah, not all of them are obviously in crypto yet. Tell us a bit of,
Yes.
did you have like clients that were a little bit out of the ordinary, or that you're allowed to talk about?
I can't talk about specific clients, but Bitcoin Swiss, it grew with the OGs of the space, I would say. And when you talk about international clients, that's also an interesting fact that Niklas is Danish.
Mhm.
So he came here from Denmark, and that's why the company Bitcoin Swiss still has a business unit in Denmark even today, and they had a lot of Danish clients at the beginning as well.
Mhm.
And those clients, they were very early in the space. This was all quite a small community. Then in 2015, Ethereum came here. Bitcoin Swiss was very close to the Ethereum team. They helped them doing their first public sale. That's how the community around Bitcoin Swiss and the Crypto Valley grew bigger and
Mhm.
bigger.
Tell me
And
more about this public sale. You're saying the Ether ICO, Bitcoin Swiss had their hands in that as well.
from what I know is that they helped the Ethereum team to raise funds. I don't know
Wow.
exactly in what way or how that happened, but that's what I know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you started 2018, so basically after the first, not the very first, but one of a very epic bull run of 2017, right? It peaked, and then when you started, actually went all downhill price wise.
Yeah.
How did that feel? How was the inside of the company? Do you remember how was the sentiment then? And what did you do? What did you need to do? Like in your day to day, did you fear for your job, for instance? Because like it was not sure at all if this crypto thing is going to continue. Now in hindsight, we are more sure, but back then I remember it was really dire times.
Mhm. I never feared for my job at any time when I was a Bitcoin Swiss, and especially never during those early days as well, because this was such a tightly knit team at that time, and there was such a big conviction that this is a technology that will change the world, and we are part of that revolution, and we're building on that, and it's gonna progress anyway at some point. So there's no need to worry. And that was a bit the feeling at that beer market in 2018.
Mhm.
And I never, even though I joined at that time, I was never much affected by the prices because I didn't join crypto to get rich or anything. But I remember the beer market 2018. It's quite similar to what we're experiencing now. So there was a lot of bad headlines and bad narratives. And people start questioning what they're doing and whether this is all legit. And there are a lot of people quitting and leaving the space. And yeah, it's similar today as well.
Mhm. It's
Yeah,
funny, no problem. We were talking about bears, but what I heard in the background are cows.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So you're in the
yeah,
countryside of Switzerland,
exactly.
also going a little bit against the mainstream by
Yeah,
choosing to live in the countryside. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
You know, it's interesting as well. I went once to a Bitcoin meetup where Niklas Nikolaj had like a speech or something, and it was at a time where I would say there have already been a lot of like crypto has been become sort of mainstream, or like the people interested in crypto, they formed around those meetups in these groups, and there was a clear like anti every other coin than Bitcoin sentiment. Not coming from Nicholas, he was just presenting there, but in the crowd, it was a pure Bitcoin meetup. And I think with Andreas I can't say his name, Antonopoulos, whatever.
Antonopoulos, yeah.
Yeah, he was presenting something there, and I remember sitting next to like some guy. I didn't know him, but he showed me his app with the Bitcoin prices, and there was like Bitcoin on top, and then the other ones you couldn't even see. Like it was just shitcoin one, shitcoin two, like you know, like an app specifically to show the prices of the other coins, but you don't even know what coin it is. It was just a poop emoji, and that somehow stuck with me.
I
You
was
know?
there as well at the meetup.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a
That,
big hall, right? It
mhm.
was at the Volkshaus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
And very, very strong energy, full house.
Yeah,
And
Bitcoin broke 10K again.
yeah,
I remember it was like down and it broke 10K again. It was kind of people were euphoric, and but I walked away a bit deflated because of this experience. Because I felt like, okay, these people are only interested in Bitcoin, and they really think all the rest is literally dog shit, right? They hate the other stuff, and that was strange to me. How was that in the company that has Bitcoin in its name?
mhm. Even though Bitcoin is in the Bitcoin Swiss name, Bitcoin Swiss was has always been impartial about what currencies they offer, what they promote, what they tell their clients. When Bitcoin Swiss was founded, there was only Bitcoin around. So that's where the name came in. And I know that we've talked a couple of times about whether it will make sense to change the name Bitcoin Swiss to some other name. And then we thought, no, Bitcoin Swiss is such a strong brand that we would only lose with that. And in a way, Bitcoin is not only a currency, it's also a concept, a larger concept, an idea, a philosophy, a fundament, a basis on which everything in this space is based upon. And I think that's what makes this name okay and intriguing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
No, I mean, nothing against the name. I just
yeah,
wondered if because there are now companies that are just focusing on Bitcoin that really
yeah.
dig down on this narrative, or you know, there's this big niche of people who are just interested in Bitcoin. They don't care about all the other stuff, and I think it's also a leadership thing. If the leaders are very ideologically connected to Bitcoin, they would not want to work with any other technology, right? But
Hmm.
that doesn't seem to be the case with Bitcoin Swiss, who, as you said, has launched other coins, and I think you had other private sales going on as well. Like
Hmm.
Polkadot was one of the big ones. Tezos, I think you also helped to get off the ground, right?
Omisa
I just
Go and
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
all kinds of cool stuff.
Yes, something else regarding Bitcoin only. I mean, at that time, there wasn't a lot of other stuff around. I mean, you had Ethereum coming up, you didn't have DeFi, you didn't have NFTs, and those two things they are now increasingly big sub parts of the whole ecosystem.
Mhm.
So I think it was natural at that time that Bitcoin was kind of at the forefront of the discussions, and now I think yeah, it's just part of the whole ecosystem.
Definitely. And now, well, before we switch to your new
Yeah.
project, I actually have one more question concerning marketing, because I used to be a marketer as well, and I wonder how our jobs might have been different because you've been the head of marketing, or you became the head of marketing of Bitcoin Suisse. And I used to be the head of marketing of a small software as a service company where we had to acquire like each client. It was really hard, and we had to, like fill the funnel with interesting people, spread awareness, and then I was also calling people and doing sales. It was a really tiny company compared to yours. But I always had the feeling when I seen the marketing from Bitcoin Swiss, it was a marketing that was more like when you arrive at the airport in Zurich, there's a big Bitcoin Swiss banner. Then you go into the tram. The whole tram was covered in Bitcoin Swiss. How did you think about marketing? Was it more like this performance marketing kind of style that I did as well? Or was it more like this, like creating awareness, going really broad with Switzerland? How was the thinking when it comes to marketing?
Definitely the latter. I think at Bitcoin Swiss, we've always thought about, or we were on a mission to make crypto mainstream. And part of that mission was bringing the word out, educate people. And that was also why we chose to do such public stunts like the Bitcoin Swiss tram in Zurich, or the airport advertising, or even the Geneva airport advertising. We had a huge advertising there as well, because it not only shaped the narrative of the Bitcoin Swiss brand, but it also shaped the narrative of Crypto Nation Switzerland. And that narrative of Crypto Nation Switzerland initially came up through the former Federal Council.
Mm-hmm. Dan. I forgot his name as well. I know who you're talking about, but it was not
Yeah.
Uli Maurer. It was the
No,
other
no,
guy.
no.
It was the FDP guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Crypto Nation Switzerland narrative was initially coined by Johann Schneider-Ammann. He was Federal Council at the time, and he held a speech, I think, at Crypto Finance Conference in Davos. That was in 2018 or 19. And then he used the term Crypto Nation Switzerland. And that was such an important term for the crypto valley, for the understanding of Swiss crypto people, that we have now a federal council who sees Switzerland as a crypto nation. And that got picked up. And we, as Bitcoin Swiss, we wanted to drive that narrative as well, because we were at the forefront of that revolution here in Switzerland, and we wanted to brand Switzerland as well with that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no more perfect location for doing that than airport advertisings, where all national and international people arrive here in Switzerland and
Yeah,
see that.
definitely. I mean, usually it's like watch brands, finance, like banks, private wealth managers, and Bitcoin Swiss. And it's great also with the name Bitcoin. I think in that regard, it's amazing because everybody knows Bitcoin, right? If you would
Mhm.
just go with another
Mhm.
name, would be maybe that has nothing to do. Anyways,
Yeah, and it's not only the narrative; it's also, like you said, uplifting the brand into the league of the champions. You
mhm.
have the best watch brands. You have Lindt und Sprüngli. You have international big brands there, and now suddenly Bitcoin Swiss is part of that league, and that creates a lot of trust, a lot of brand equity, and that was a
Mm.
big thinking behind it as well.
Yeah. Last question regarding Bitcoin Swiss, and then we move over. But I just remembered when you said you wanted to bring it into the mainstream. I thought it's funny because there was a time in the last bull run, 2021, like you couldn't open an account if you would invest not at least 100,000 Swiss francs, which is around same as US dollars for simplicity for international listeners.
Mhm.
That's not very mainstream. Not everybody has
Yeah.
100K to invest in
Yeah,
crypto.
yeah, yeah. We grappled for a long time with that decision, because one part of Bitcoin Swiss missions, as I said, was to make it mainstream, but the other part was, or has always been, to serve its clients with the best possible service and handholding clients, and really establish a personal relationship, and have a phone number where you can call your client advisor at all times and ask questions. And that's something that was unheard of in the crypto industry, because usually you go to those big exchanges and there you had zero customer or client support. And we wanted to combine those two things. And yeah, at those times when the bull run was, it just became impossible to serve clients with the quality that we wanted to adhere to. So we had to increase the limit and free up resources to give the clients that we already had the best possible service.
I think just to open an account with you, it must occur like hundreds of francs of costs, right? Because you have to check where is the money coming from. As a broker, you don't really are allowed to hold that money. I heard all kinds of stuff. It's a little bit complicated, but basically, if you're a small fish, you're not bringing any profit to the company. You know, hard to ask this question, but how profitable is running such a brokerage, more or less? Like, how do you make the money?
Also, it depends on the services you offer. The more mature the space becomes, the less profitable it is. 4 or 5 years ago, running a brokerage which was trustworthy and reliable and high quality was quite profitable. And now, brokerage and trading and custody and staking, those things all become commodities, and margins are shrinking and shrinking. So it becomes harder to differentiate yourself. What you see now is that you have a lot of specialized players who only focus on one of those core services, scale it, and optimize their profitability. And that's what Bitcoin Suisse and other like all-in-one service providers need to think about. How do they differentiate themselves, and how do they create the value with an all-in-one package compared to those specialized service providers?
And now you're not there anymore. Enough Bitcoin Swiss. You're doing your own thing. Dematerialized.xyz is the Substack. And I love that wording, by the way. You say, on Dematerialized, I'm publishing obsessively curated field notes and actionable insights on crypto and Web3. And I love that word, obsessively curated. Tell us more about your new venture. What are you doing there?
So Dematerialized is a blog where I publish my research, my notes, what I see in the space. It actually started unintentionally. I just started reading a lot of what's happening, and I recognized if you're not very deep in the space, you have a very hard time discerning important from not important. And so I started creating a log where I log all those things that I've read, and it just started being a filter because I've been in the space for several years. I know a bit what's going on, and that's how the idea materialized came along. That's as a side gig that I'm doing at the moment. I just think it's super interesting what happens in the space. It's still a roller coaster every week. I don't know anything except maybe now AI that offers so much different things all the time, and headlines and developments and interesting stuff like crypto and Web3.
So, okay, this is a side project. What is your main thing at the moment?
The main thing is 51 Ventures. That's a company that I used to advise brands and crypto projects mainly on Web3 topics, NFT applications, and things like this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But it's somehow connected, right? In the sense that
Yeah, it's all connected. Yeah.
yeah. And I've seen that you also, because it's a blog, but it's also a newsletter that you send it out.
Mhm.
And I find this a very interesting field to be in terms of like it's now kind of a hype a little bit also to build newsletters, right? And try to monetizing it. How many readers do you have at the moment?
A bit over 5,000
Okay,
readers.
and,
Yeah.
and they're probably Swiss, mainly crypto interested people, or not necessarily. Do you know that? What, the demographics?
No, mostly US based readers,
Oh
and
wow.
mostly people working in big corporations,
Hmm.
working at brands, interested or working within Web3 units, or interested in how they could apply Web3 technology for their brands.
I mean, that's a very valuable target audience if you think about it.
Yeah.
Did you already start to monetize the newsletter?
And
Because that would be the next step, right?
yeah, I have a sponsor, which is Near Foundation. They're sponsoring the newsletter. I've also thought about creating a paid part of the newsletter, but I haven't come around doing it. And I'm not sure whether I want to do it, because I wanted to make it accessible as possible for as many readers. And if you start with paid content, then it's always exclusive.
Yeah.
And I think you need to strike a really fine balance between exclusive and non-exclusive content. And maybe
Yeah, for
it's a bit
sure.
too early for that.
Hmm. All ways of making money online interests me, but mostly connected with content, with marketing, newsletters, podcasting. Yeah, but I'm not sure if we should talk so much about it on the podcast. But I can send you some things in terms of, people who have launched interesting newsletters and monetized them very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you know, like the Milk Road or the Hustle from the US that was sold for, I think, around 30 million,
No,
stuff
no.
like
Yeah, but yeah, there are a lot of those stories. And I think that's also part of the time we live in, the creator economy. So a lot of people starting their own businesses, journalists who drop out of newspapers and start their own blogs, and have a lot
Exactly.
of tools available to monetize what they do.
Yeah. And when it comes to what you do with your other venture, the consulting, etc., like we all know, I think metaverse was the word of the year in 2022 or 21.
Mm-hmm.
And every company thought they need to go into the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, like, suddenly, like your boss from the C level comes down to you and asks you, hey, what do you know about this metaverse? And where is our metaverse strategy? And Facebook changes the name to Meta and puts like billions into these goggles. And somehow not much has materialized so far. I would say it has been a little bit of a bubble. How do you, because your consulting is going a little bit into metaverse as well, right? Web3 metaverse. Do you feel the interest is still here, and or what are the misconceptions? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the word metaverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's exactly how you described when Facebook changed its name to Meta. That was, I think, in October 2021. That was the height of the hype.
Mhm.
That was the metaverse bubble, and of course it bursted a bit since then. But I would say brands are definitely still interested, and uh, there's a lot of interest from brands. If you look at the Interbrand Top 100 global brands ranking, and you count how many brands have started experimenting with NFT technology and Web3 tech, it's about 40%. And it continues to rise, and the biggest brands in the world are doing stuff with it. And that brings us to misconceptions. One of the misconceptions you could have is it's already mainstream. I think it's not at all mainstream. It's still very niche, even though those big brands entered the space. It's a lot of experimenting going on, a lot of projects that don't yet create real value for users or customers, projects that aren't profitable, projects that wouldn't fulfill the traditional marketing KPIs. We saw that in 2021, but also in 2022. And now, with I would say, a more damped economic macro environment, brands also start to look at profitability. And it becomes harder to do such projects. And suddenly they need to prove to the management team that whatever they're doing here with those Web3 things actually creates value and creates profit for the company.
Something in the Apple ecosystem that's not even connected to Web3.
Mhm.
How do you think about it?
I think the term metaverse has become such an inflated term that it almost has no meaning today. When I tell you about metaverse, you probably have a completely different understanding than someone else, and it's just used in various different contexts. Sometimes from centralized companies like Facebook, sometimes in the context of crypto and Web3. But if I had to give you a definition, what I always use is it's an immersive, social, and interoperable, that's also very important, persistent virtual environment. And that could be literally anything.
Yeah. Is
But
the definition of AI.
I think
Okay.
why it's so often used in the context of Web3 is because the big narrative is there are ever more people spending time in virtual worlds. And we've seen that with our generation. We were the generation of social media, generation of mobile phones. We started spending hours a day on mobile phones. And now the next generation is not only spending time on mobile phones, but they're spending time in those virtual worlds like Roblox and Sandbox and Minecraft. And now, if you connect that with Web3, part of the value proposition of Web3 is that you can own digital goods, digital assets, NFTs, clothes, whatever, then this becomes a very intriguing value proposition because now you have an immersive digital world where you can own stuff. You can build your identity with what you own.
Mhm.
And I think that's where the connection lies between Web3 and the metaverse.
Yeah, yeah. What I've seen and also experienced myself is something quite weird when it comes to NFTs, right? I mean, we all remember when NFTs came up, and the first reaction was, ah, but you can right click and save the NFT. Obviously, you can do that. You can, the digital file or the pleasure of consuming this image is for everyone, but to own it is basically only a bragging right. And it like I want to own some NFTs. Some NFTs have somehow triggered something in me. Wouldn't it be cool to own a Fidenza? Like I like art blocks. Wouldn't it be cool to own a CryptoPunk? Just for the bragging rights. I mean, I can download all the 10,000 CryptoPunks, of course, and have them on my hard drive, but that's not the point. Um, and that's quite powerful, like just to invoke this wanting to have. And I think some brands may have a bigger chance to do that than others. What
Mhm.
brands do you see doing a great job with that?
Mhm. Yeah, wanting to have and expressing your identity with it. I
Hmm.
mean, that's been part of the consumer goods market forever. And hopefully that thing also has some kind of utility. Then it would be the perfect product, you know. And I think brands who jumped on that very early are luxury brands because they live from people possessing their stuff and building their identity with that.
Hmm.
And they recognize that this suddenly becomes possible now in the digital space. What I think is still lacking, though, is some kind of utility. So let's do an example. If you buy a Gucci sneaker as a virtual good, as an NFT, what can you do with it? Where can you present it? Where can you wear it? And that's why I said interoperability is so important, because a metaverse without interoperability doesn't allow you to port those assets across worlds. That means they lose a lot of value. So that's very important. Yeah.
And now looking at you, you're sitting in this beautiful farmhouse connected to the earth. You like cycling. We've talked about that before the recording. What is your interest in this kind of luxury space, or what do you want to own? What kind of NFTs are invoking your desire for luxury? Because it seems like we both are maybe not the right target group, or are
Yeah.
we?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm definitely not interested in luxury goods. And I also wouldn't say that this is only something for luxury goods. I think
Mhm.
that it's an obvious case for them, but I think it's something extremely interesting for every brand, because whether you buy a Gucci bag for several $100s virtually or you buy Nike sneakers for $50 virtually, the concept and the logic behind it is still the same. And what I find so intriguing, but by the way, if you ask what NFT I have, I'm, for example, part of the Bitcoin punks, but maybe we can talk later about that.
That's
Wha- wha-
interesting.
wha-
What
wha-
are the Bitcoin punks? Is it the original project?
yeah, it's an ordinal project. It was one of the first ordinal collections that were minted or inscribed.
Ah, it's
They,
the CryptoPunks on originals,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Like the whole collection one to
The
one.
the whole collection. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So you own a CryptoPunk, but it's a original punk.
yeah, yeah.
Price-wise, probably a huge difference.
Huge difference, yeah.
Yeah.
Much cheaper. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say was why it's so intriguing is because I think every consumer brand has now this possibility to create virtual scarcity
Mhm.
and virtual ownership. That unlocks so many different use cases for them to engage their customers and work together in new ways and even change the model how they create value. It's very exciting, I think.
And which company does the best job right now? If people are listening and think, "Hey, I want to check this out for myself," where do you point them to? Who is killing it in this game right now?
I would point people to Nike. They're doing an extremely good job. They've been in the space for several years. And so far, I think they're the closest to crack Web3 tech supported mass adoption. They're not there yet, but I think they're very close. They've been early in the space. They started understanding the space. They partnered, for example, with Artifact. That was a virtual sneaker designer company and very close knit community in the Web3 space already. Nike partnered with them, learned with them, co-created products with them. And now they have a much bigger vision. They basically want to build or connect everything they do, virtual and physical, and build a platform where users can experience everything that Nike does digitally. And that platform is called swoosh.com.
And just to have an idea, does it
Yeah.
mean like in practice? Does it mean if I go to a Nike store, I would buy a shoe, then I also get that same shoe as an NFT?
Yes, for example. Or you
Okay.
have an NFT and you have some special perks when you enter a store.
Mm.
And they're not doing that yet, but I think it's very obvious that they will connect it soon.
Okay,
What
so like
what
a membership or something,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
get discounts, etc.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What they did so far is they created that platform. They onboarded hundred thousands of users to that. Each user receiving a swoosh ID, which is an NFT in itself. And they made a few contests so far where users could start creating virtual sneakers. And those virtual sneakers are called Our Force Ones,
Hmm.
which is based on the heritage of the brand of the Air Force Ones.
But it's got our force ones.
Our
Our
Force, yeah.
not yours, but ours.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly,
our
yeah.
yeah.
Because so much in Web3 is about community and building together and co-creation, this was a perfect name for
Hmm.
that collection.
Hmm.
And it's based on the most iconic thing Nike ever created with their brand, which is the Air Force One shoe.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, they started like co-creating that with users, and users kind of entered the contest to design the best shoes, and then there was a vote on who designed the best ones, and now those shoes are produced in digital collections and they can be bought by other users. And the
Okay.
creators, of course, they receive royalty fees, and that's all done on the blockchain itself.
You're obsessively curating news, and I think why don't we just talk about what happened just recently? The biggest news of the day. What caught your eye?
As the biggest news of this week, and I would even say of the last couple of months, and maybe even this year, was the Ripple case. That was finally ruled by a judge that Ripple, which was or is a company who started the Ripple currency, um,
XRP. Mm.
XRP exactly, and they got accused by the SEC that XRP is a security and that they conducted an unregistered security sale. And that case was going on for the last 3 years.
Hmm.
And it was like a Damocles sword looming over the whole industry because that's a landmark decision how cryptocurrencies in the future could be classified.
Yeah, and it was in the light of new accusations by the SEC, or not accusations, lawsuits, right? So does that take that all now away? These discussions, or what did you read? How are experts thinking about that?
Yeah, as you said, there was a lot going on this year. The SEC accusing, suing large established crypto players in the US of unregistered security sales, including Coinbase. And before the Ripple case came out, it almost looked like crypto will not have a good future in the US. I would say that narrative now shifted. It's not all black and white in this case. I think there are very important details and nuances that you need to consider, but all in all, this is positive news. It shifts the narrative back again that crypto could have a future in the US.
Mhm.
It's affecting the whole space because it's not only crypto finance, there are also a lot of brands in the US who build Web3, and that's just a very positive sign overall.
Yeah, and Ripple literally did a huge jump. It's crazy. I think it went up like almost 100% for a while there. It literally just the price jumped up, and the whole market reacted very positively. Basically, every coin pumped
Mhm.
yesterday.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that was great. That's great. That's why I'm so happy
And
today.
yeah, people are also positive about Coinbase because Coinbase got also sued by the SEC for unregistered security sales, and that could have an impact on their lawsuit with the SEC as well. It's probably also positive news for Coinbase, but as I said, there are a lot of nuances also with the Ripple case, but overall it's positive.
Do you feel now, as you don't work anymore at Bitcoin Suisse, do you miss kind of being there because you would pick up more signs when the market picks up? You know, like internally, like yeah, I don't know, more calls, more clients, more interests, or not necessarily? Or do you still feel the same connection?
I still feel the same connection. I would say even a more closer connection now because I have a bit more time to actually read stuff, and I've set myself a good like list of sources where I get the most important information. And additionally, I would say I even have a less biased perspective.
Less
uh,
biased,
Less
yeah.
biased because when
Uh-huh.
you're working inside such a company, you usually have the rosy glasses on.
Hmm.
And now I often see stuff and assess it from a person that doesn't, like a normal person who doesn't read or care about crypto all day. And
But
I
you read and care about crypto all day.
yeah, yeah.
And also the sources that you go to, they're probably all pro. I mean, only pro crypto is talking about crypto unless it goes to the mainstream media, and then there's nothing new to learn for you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true, yeah. But I would say I definitely became a bit more critical on mainstream adoption and what it needs and what's still missing and all that. Yeah,
Let's say cautiously optimistic.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's how I feel too.
and
Yeah,
also realistic.
yeah.
I mean, coming back to the NFT Web3 adoption topic with brands, it's super cool that there are so many brands experimenting with that. But we also have to be realistic and see what's missing. And what's missing
Mhm.
is a clear utility and the UX. I mean, it's still way too complicated. It involves too many steps. It needs too much education to onboard the mainstream user. And I think we just have to be realistic about that and work towards making it better, simpler,
Yeah, yeah.
more
Uh,
useful.
And this reminds me also of a lot of crypto still happening on desktop, but kids, they don't even know. Like I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and they tell me kids don't even know like simplest things on computers anymore. Like they're on their phone. The phone is their entry into the world, and that's real mainstream, right? Kids
Yeah.
are on TikTok. They know probably less than we did in the same age about computers. If you grew up in this kind of curated environment of a phone or of an iPad, you understand even less, like even where a file is saved, or
Mhm.
how all this stuff works. So I think there the real mainstream is still far away. Of course there are a lot of kids that know much more than we did also, but they're kind of nerds or the gamers. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean in a good way, but this it's a niche, right? It's not the mainstream.
Mhm. Well, what do you think are the biggest adoption hurdles for crypto and Web3?
The biggest hurdles, I think also it's UX. It's use cases that are penetrating your day to day. For instance,
Hmm.
I think crypto has a lot of use cases already with a store of value, right? Like Bitcoin. I think NFTs, etc., have a use case in terms of you can trade it, you can speculate. It's kind of like the biggest casino in the world. That's already a use case. If you look at Las Vegas, how many billions worth is Las Vegas? That's also a real use case. Then the adoption will only come if we have a phone, if Apple or a big company will bring it to their native, to the phone. I think the phone is the key.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, apps. A killer app on the phone. That would be adoption for me.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, I'm quite happy also if it stays niche as long as we are free to play with it.
I actually think we're on the verge of making at least NFTs mainstream, with brands now experimenting but still targeting a niche Web3 audience. Some of them are on the cusp of now integrating Web3 tech without actually mentioning it and pushing it to their whole customer base. When this happens successfully, then we reach mainstream.
And would you say that's stuff like, okay, I have an expensive watch and I want to be sure it's an original one, and then there would be somehow a way of verifying it on the blockchain? Like this kind of stuff? Or are you talking more about, okay, I'm Starbucks and I'm having now an NFT and I'm now a member of, I don't
Yeah,
know, and I get
exactly.
a free cup every now and then?
Yeah, yeah, both.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The one case when you say about Starbucks is just like, I don't care if it's interoperable. It can be on Web 2 as well. If it's just like some loyalty points, then I wouldn't need to have it on the blockchain.
Mhm.
But if it's about like miles for airplanes, I mean, this is a huge market and it's complicated, and you can sell them, and there it would help a lot, right? If you really have this decentralized way of trading them.
Mhm. Yeah, you also you could transfer them, you could trade them, monetize them, and hopefully you also get utility beyond just the monetary value. The casino is making money, could be use case and incentive for people to engage with it. So value, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily need to be monetary value. It could also be utility within a brand ecosystem that you really care about, or that gives you access to unique experiences that you couldn't have before, or gives you a certain status within a community, or things like this.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see a world like that. Also with live events, with ticketing, which is also kind of broken, right? I mean, now Taylor Swift is coming to Zurich soon, and I read that people pay like $3,000 on the secondary market for a ticket to go and see Taylor Swift.
Mhm.
And if Taylor Swift would have a community of loyal fans who have proven that they listened so and so many hours, and they have gained over the lifetime this kind of token of being a super fan, and then they could log into a website and prove that and get the tickets earlier than everybody else for the normal price, that would be something super valuable.
Mhm.
But what happens then? Then people will start to sell these tokens to somebody else if it's not soul bound, which is a new interesting idea as well.
Mhm.
And I think at the end, if something is valuable, it will get financialized somehow on the blockchain or on
Mhm.
DeFi somehow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
Cool. Mark, where should people find you? What should people do? Guide them to your Substack or Twitter, whatever you want.
Yeah, you can find me on dematerialized.xyz.
I will post it in the show
Yeah,
notes because
yeah,
it's written a bit funky. It's not straightforward. So
yeah.
some
It's
some words.
dematerialized, so there are some letters missing.
Okay, I see. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Loras.
If you're still listening, chances are that you liked this episode. DeFi is not just me, it's also you, the listener. And each day there are more listeners joining, and together we can spread the word about DeFi by giving it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening. Send this episode to a friend who might be interested. Check out the website, visit defire.money and click on subscribe to get the new episode and in the future also blog posts directly into your inbox. Also make sure to follow me on Twitter @defire_money. All of this helps so we can continue to produce more episodes more frequently and get the most interesting guests that you deserve. Good night and see you soon.